wide time span here, I'm going to go ahead and choose 29 days plus the current day, which gives me a 30-day moving average. So if I click that, you can see it changes. It looks quite different. And then what I'll do, so I want to overlay the second one on top of the first one. So I need them to both occupy the same space. So there's different ways to do that. The way that I think is easiest is if I just click on my second measure here and I choose dual axis. So what that's going to do is that's going to actually draw them both on top of each other. And on the left, you'll have one axis. On the right, you'll have a different one. And generally, that's bad. Generally, we don't recommend this in the data viz world because it's just super confusing. And you can find correlations and things that don't make any sense at all. So instead, it'll be fine, though, if we synchronize the axis. So if I right-click on my secondary axis and I choose Synchronize, you'll see that the scales aren't off, and it's telling an accurate story. Now I can hide this here. I can uncheck Show Header, so I'm not confused by that, so I only have one scale to worry about visually when I'm trying to consume this information. Okay, this is the most basic example. Now, of course, I wouldn't recommend having these colors. They're both super bright and kind of jumping out at me. So let's say I want sales to be more subtle. Let's say if I were to go to a light palette with that one, make it like a green, and do maybe a medium with this one, the medium blue, see how that looks. There you go. And maybe I'll even make the moving average a dark one. Pretty trees. Okay, so there you go. So I still have the context of my daily detail in my viz, but I also have the moving average. So my eyes, when I'm looking at this, because I made the color of the daily detail, the sales, very kind of faint, it's not drawn to that. It's drawn to the actual dark blue line here. So we're achieving that goal of sharing the meaningful thing, which in this case, 30-day moving average across such a large time span, but we're not losing the detail, right? So you can kind of have your cake and eat it too, I guess. So the next one I want to show you is just this same thing, but just a bit of a cleaner version. So what I would do to make a cleaner version, and I'll just duplicate this, we'll call this basic. I'll duplicate this sheet here. And when I duplicate the sheet, what we have is the same thing, but I'm going to change the mark type. So we're both using lines right now, but I want that first one to be a circle. And you'll see what happens is that, okay, it's less cluttery now, right? The lines connecting those dots are less attention grabbing. They're not pulling me away from the dark blue line here. So I could play with this some more. I'd probably adjust the size, make it a little bit smaller. And you need to be aware of kind of what your audience is going to be consuming this on, if it's a mobile device or something else. So you still have the detail there, and you can see though now that blue line is really standing out. So I still have all the details of the other things, and maybe this one up here is an anomaly. I'm going to go ahead and exclude that one for the purpose of this demo. Maybe we actually duplicated our data. So there you go. You can get a better sense now of just, what the trend actually is. And so when I look at this as a user, I'm pretty much instantly drawn to this blue line, and the other stuff I might not even know what it is. And down the road, what I would probably do again is I would change this to be daily actuals, and then call this one 30-day average or something like that. Okay, so that way you have some kind of indicators there of what's what. So that's a cleaner one. I could even play with the size of the line here. Maybe it should be a little bit lighter since we have so much variation there in that. And there you go. So that is like the cleaner version of the first one. Now, the third thing I would do is I would probably add sort of a reference here, because it's cool to see the 30-day moving average, but I probably want to know like what is the actual average. So let me duplicate that sheet again. And in this case, what I'm going to do is actually just go up to my analytics pane and drag on an average, and I'm just going to do it. See, I can add it for both of them if I do it like that, and I can add it. It's just one table right now, so that's where I'll want to drag it. But I can just add it to the second one here, which is that calculation. So I don't have to have an average on both of them. I'm just going to do an average of the moving average essentially. So what is like my overall average here for the daily sales? And it's $1,813. And then I can format this if I want. I'll actually just do an edit. And I can say, you know, a common thing to do is to say, for the label, give it something like average, maybe like overall average, and then put the value in there, something like that. Hit OK, and you can see that I now have this indicator there for my users. So that's a way, this is what I would do. The first step I would say to wow, because this is really going to tell a much more interesting story than just either of these things combined. And you have a lot of things visually on the page here, but you're not really killing the viz by distracting them with too much data. You know, we're trying to eliminate the chart junk. We're trying to use colors in a meaningful way. And this is something I've actually done quite a bit, where it's real common, a viz that I would create of a moving average of some type and dots for the actuals. And people tend to get it. So give that a go. And if you have any questions about that or you get tripped up, again, ping me on either Twitter or at help@bensolons.com. Okay, so I'm going to call this one added reference. All right, take 2, or act 2, the forecast. And this one's pretty straightforward, but I can't tell you how many years being able to produce some sort of a forecast around sales or any metric it really just goes a long way, especially with the business type audience. So if you're building this for, you know, a business person, then they're gonna like this. So basic steps to build a forecast in Tableau. It honestly can't be easier. I drag order date up. I'll go ahead and drill down to the month. You know what? Let's go down to week and see. It gets even more data, more interesting there. So we have data points there. I'm going to drag a measure on. We've been working with sales, so let's stick with sales. All right, it's crazy all over the place, just like we saw in the last viz. But what I want to do now is just right-click in my pane here and choose Forecast, Show Forecast. Now this one has an interesting thing because it's basically saying I don't really have enough good data, or I can't really find a good pattern in it. So I wanted to show that because sometimes this is what you get and it's not meaningful. So maybe in this case, because our data is so wide, it's from 2011 so 4 years of data, maybe week isn't the correct grain at which to look at it. Maybe month would be more accurate. Well, certainly visually, that makes more sense, right? I can actually see these kind of trends, and then I can actually get a forecast now, which is pretty awesome. And using this, you know, the dark line in the middle is the one that's the actual prediction, and the bands are the confidence of where it might be. So this is really powerful. In doing this little thing, that one click and changing it there, it actually ran several different models. It picked the one that makes the most sense, and it drew that. And I can actually download this data. So if I don't want this in this format, I can highlight that data, and I can actually download it right there. So I could actually just punch this into Excel. So even if this is one of the interesting things about Tableau is you don't have to deliver things in Tableau to get value out of it, right? I could be punching this back into Excel and saying, here you go. And that's a far better way, or a far more accurate way of coming up with these projections than any kind of linear basic modeling that you're probably doing in Excel. Not to say you can't do more advanced modeling in Excel, but just to say that it's not common. So there's that. That's the forecast. Now we can slice and dice this forecast. So we can look at the forecast for different things. Like if I were to drag category onto rows, I'd be able to see different projections for different category lines. Now, sometimes as I go down, it may get a little fuzzy. If I drill down from category to subcategory, you can see it's taking a little bit longer there because it's having to run several different forecast models for every single one of these across every month here, these long time spans. So you can see, you know, it gets kind of fuzzy when you have that many. So, you know, granularity is important. You know, I talk about that a lot when I talk about my data viz stuff. But there you go. I mean, this is like the most basic thing to do. Just for, you know, contrast sake, I'll draw it on the page there. And that